Up now with journalist Martha Gill, Emma Wedd from the Free Speech Union, and co-founder of the Muslim Debate Initiative, Abdullah Al-Andalusi. Let's start with you, if we can, Abdullah. Quite a strong rhetoric from Douglas Murray. I'm always aware that Muslim extremists do not in any way speak for the majority of Muslims. But to be fair, the Iranian government over the weekend said Rushdie was to blame for being attacked. That is completely and utterly despicable, isn't it?
Well, firstly, I find it rather strange that Douglas Murray, who's had a history of advocating for restrictions on Muslim speakers at universities...
But you can answer my question. Do you think it's despicable that the Iranian government have said that he took it on himself? He was stabbed in broad daylight. Do you find that despicable?
But if I may, he deigns to say he's a champion for free speech, so to speak, but yet his organisation argued for restrictions for platforms for Muslim speakers going to universities. He wanted to ban the burqa in public buildings and a kind of social ban on it in public. So for him, and argued that conditions for Muslims in Europe must be made harder across the board.
Let's bring Douglas back in. Douglas, wait.
I find it a little. I find it a little bit strange that he should deign to call himself, brazenly call himself, or at least imply some kind of champion for free speech. Or free expression.
Look, I've probably got to answer that. You'll have noticed, and all of your viewers will have noticed, that this Islamist lunatic in your studio can't answer the basic question. Let's try it again and make it simple for you. Why don't you say whether or not you are completely condemning of any violence against Salman Rushdie or anyone else who is deemed to have said something heretical? Why don't we start with the basics for you?
OK, firstly, I want to answer his question, because he asked me first, which is about the Iranian regime. Well, having not being an Iranian citizen nor participated in any elections to elect the Iranian regime, the Iranian regime doesn't really represent 1.8 billion Muslims. And
OK, so if you're here representing 1.8 billion Muslims, it's very simple. Douglas has just said it. All right, as your own self, having heard what he said, do you accept people saying, be it the Iranian government or Muslim extremists, and I made the caveat and I repeat it, Muslim extremists, that one of the biggest problems I have is that people look at the whole thing and they shouldn't. Do you agree with anybody who comes up with the sentence, he was to blame for being knifed in broad daylight 15 times in his neck? Do you?
The only person to blame for the knifing of Salman Rushdie is the assailant himself.
Not the Iranian regime who put the fatwa on him in the first place.
Well, unless you can demonstrate that they were specifically colluding or they sent an agent.
They said he was to blame.
He was in communication with the Iranian Revolutionary Guard.
And that's their opinion, right? But I'm only here to talk about, if you're asking me who's to blame, I say the assailant, much like Douglas Murray said that the Christchurch killer, the one who massacred the Muslims in the mosque, that only the killer was to blame, not those who radicalised him into viewing Muslims as a threat to the West.
What you'll find is that if somebody put millions of dollars on someone's head, yours, for instance, or mine, and somebody then attacked us, you would think that the person who had put millions of dollars on our head would bear some responsibility. But because you're such a dishonest weasel, you're not even willing to do that. You're not even willing to do the basic thing of condemning the attack.
Sticks and stones, Douglas Murray, sticks and stones.
Why don't we
You need to demonstrate that the person was motivated by the reward.
I'll tell you what I'd like to motivate. I'll tell you what I'd like to demonstrate. This is my programme. Martha Gill, journalist. What's your opinion on this situation?
Well, it's completely horrific. I completely agree with the other two, with Douglas Murray, in that if putting a bounty on someone's head in the first place is an act of violence, whether or not that's followed up by people taking on the challenge, and clearly somebody has, and they are entirely to blame for that.
Let's move on to... I wanted to ask you generally, you've been quite open about free speech. When does free speech cross a line, Martha?
So every functioning society has to have some limits on free speech. If you agree with any law on hate speech, then you agree on limits to free speech in society. You know, if you say actually it's fine to say anything, you quickly run up against a paradox, which is that you say it's fine to somebody to go on TV and call for the death of somebody else for expressing a view. So their freedom of speech is immediately restricting the freedom of speech of others. So you do need some limits on free speech in a free society. Now, of course, we can argue where you draw the line.
I was going to say, Emma, would you say we've gone too far?
In restricting free speech,
Yeah.
I think absolutely we have. I agree with Douglas that I think that short of incitement, those things that are illegal under the law, incitement being things like, for example, putting a fatwa out on somebody, that would count as incitement in my book because it's actively calling for violence against someone. And in this case, for something that someone has written.
Does incitement compel people to actually be violent, though?
Well, hold on a second. Does it incite them? It encourages them. If you are through a group or a clan or whatever you want to say, and I'm treading carefully for obvious reasons, if you feel that you're following a group, whatever it is, and they're telling you to do something, you're sitting there saying that bloke wasn't. I mean,
Isn't that my free will, though? Isn't the whole basis of the Western system based on people's free will?
Do you believe that man would have gone and stabbed Salman Rushdie unless he had been encouraged, incentivised, galvanised, whatever words you want, from people, the Iranian government, who say Salman Rushdie is to blame on putting a fatwa on his head? That's wrong,
I'm
isn't it?
simply saying that, unlike knee-jerk dog whistle politics we hear from Douglas Murray, why don't we wait to the court case to see what motivated the individual? I'm waiting for the evidence. I'm waiting to, what does he say motivated him? If he said it was motivated by the Iranian government fatwa, fine, I accept.
Do you not think he might have been? I guess is the question.
Yeah, he might have been,
right.
yes.
I'd like to finish my point.
Yeah,
because,
go.
So we have in this country a teacher who is still in hiding, the teacher from Batley Grammar School, because he showed a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad to his class. He's still in hiding with his young family. That is in this country now. I think that what we have done as a result of everything that happened with Salman Rushdie in the intervening 33 years, I think that we have internalised this attitude of censorship, so that now if somebody wanted to write a book like Salman Rushdie's book, no publisher would touch them because they would know what the implications would be for that person, because we've internalised Sharia law on this. We've internalised, in many ways, we've internalised the censorship of radical ideological groups.
I don't think you can compare an illiberal regime such as the one in Iran to the one here.
That's not what I was doing. But...
No, of course, but you can't really compare the types of restriction on free speech. We have some restrictions laid down in law. They have a huge number of restrictions enforced by their government and ruling groups. The way that free speech gets restricted here is more by a process of consensus and debate, like the debate we're having here, on where lines should be drawn. It's often done with individuals. You can pretty much say anything you like if you find the right audience for it.
I would love to sit here all night. I literally am being shouted at in my ear. We could continue this. To all of you, Abdullah, thank you so much indeed. Douglas Murray from New York, Martha Gill, and obviously Emma Webb. Everybody has an opinion. Somebody said to me today, the attacker of Salman Rushdie, like millions of others worldwide, almost certainly had absolutely no knowledge of the Satanic Verses, a book that came out 33 years ago. So one would have to wonder, is he just an evil person or is he motivated? What are your thoughts? It's important. At the end of the day, everybody will have their own opinion.